Today we're going to be taking a look at changing the brake fluid on a 2018 Husqvarna FE350. Now today we're just going to do the front brake, but the process is the same for the front and the rear brake. It's been about a year now since I've had this bike, so it's about due for some fresh fluid, especially for the new season. Now I have a vacuum bleeder on hand that I'm going to use, but you don't have to necessarily use one of those. It just makes the job a little bit easier. It shouldn't be that difficult, and it should realistically take me less than an hour to complete. This is my first time doing this on this bike, so apologize if it's not 100% perfect. But with that said, let's dive into it. So the first thing I'm going to do is just loosen up the throttle tube and assembly here just a little bit so I can roll it back out of the way to have clear access. The next step is to take off the reservoir cap. Make sure you're wearing gloves as brake fluid is pretty nasty. Also make sure if you get brake fluid on any painted surfaces that you clean it up right away, as it is corrosive. So the brake fluid actually looks pretty good. There's a little bit of stuff in it, but not too bad. Looks a little low actually. But the manual does say to change it every year, so that's what we're gonna go ahead and do. There you can kind of see what it looks like. Alright, so I've got my vacuum pump here, and what we're gonna do now is there's a little bleeder valve down here, and we're gonna take this vacuum pump and hook it up to this bleeder valve, and we're gonna pump some vacuum into this system so there's pulling force against this bleeder valve, and then we'll slowly crack it open and let the old brake fluid come down from the top and through the lines into this little reservoir here. And while we're doing that, we're going to be filling the upper reservoir up there with brand new brake fluid, and we'll just do that until we have fresh, clean brake fluid throughout the system and we're sure that there's no air bubbles in there. Now when you're doing this, it's really important that you don't let that upper reservoir run dry, or else you're going to suck a bunch of air bubbles into the system, and you're going to have to kind of repeat this process again to get all the air bubbles out. And it's also important that you don't let air flow back in from the bottom as well. The vacuum pump definitely helps with that, but you can certainly do this without this tool as well. But it's a cheap tool, so I definitely recommend investing in one, as you can use it with a lot of other things as well. So we're gonna go ahead and get started on this. All right, so we're gonna get the vacuum pump hooked up here. Now we're gonna start pumping some vacuum into the system. And we'll go ahead and go up to about 10 bar or so for now. And while that's on there, what we're gonna do is loosen up this little valve here. Alright, you see some brake fluid came out of there. Now we're going to add more to the reservoir, making sure we don't run that dry. Now we'll continue this process of putting new brake fluid in and then opening the bleeder valve up and running that fluid through, making sure we're getting out any air bubbles and getting out the old fluid. All we're gonna keep doing down here is making sure we have enough vacuum in the system. You can see I've already bled out some fluid here of some of the older stuff, and all I'm doing is keeping vacuum in there and making sure the reservoir is full up top, and then I'm just slowly opening this valve here until we start to see brake fluid come through. I'll let it flow for a little bit and then I'll close it back up. So I think now I'm pretty close to where I want to be, and the fluid is looking much clearer than it was before, and I'm not seeing any air bubbles come through the system. So I think I'm pretty much about good. I'm going to go up there and pump the lever a few times and feel how tight it is. compared to how it was before. And then I think that's pretty much it, and we'll just kind of wrap up here on the front brake. Okay, so the fluid's looking pretty good, and the brake lever is also feeling really good as well. Now all we have to do is make sure the fluid is at the proper height here in the reservoir, and if that's the case, then we'll go ahead and put the bladder and cap back on the top. Now you can probably see that the fluid in there now is much clearer than it was before we started. Alright, so the manual states that the brake fluid should be 5 millimeters from the top of the reservoir. I've got my caliper here set to 5 millimeters. So what we're gonna do is just check. We'll see where that's at. Conveniently, there's actually a little marking on the inside of the reservoir here that lines up perfectly with 5 millimeters. So what we're gonna do is fill this reservoir up to the line inside here, and then we'll go ahead and put the bladder and the cap back on. All right, we're at the level now, so let's just put the cap back on and wrap this up. Now we'll just clean up any brake fluid that's spilt. Actually, the last thing we're going to do here is put a zip tie around the handlebars and the brake lever and hold that brake lever closed. What that's going to do is pressurize the system, and any air that is in the system will come up here to the top and clear out of the system. So we'll let this sit overnight, and when we come back in the morning, this brake lever should be feeling nice. Alright, so that's all there is to it. That was actually super easy, way easier than I thought it was going to be. Again, this is my first time bleeding brakes on a motorcycle, so I wasn't exactly sure what I was getting into, but I felt that it was going to be pretty easy, and it was. It probably took me an hour even with filming and moving the camera around, so it should take you guys 30 minutes or less depending on the tools you have. The vacuum pump bleeder definitely worked very well, and I'm glad that I had that, so I do recommend picking one of those up, as it's something you'll use probably all over the place, you know, for the clutch and even for your cars and things like that. But no, that was super easy. Don't worry if brake fluid kind of seeps out of the top when you're putting the cap back on. That's normal. Just make sure you clean it up and get it off of any painted surfaces so it doesn't eat away at any of those surfaces, because it is pretty corrosive stuff. But I hope you guys found this video informative, and I hope it helps some of you guys get through the very same process. There'll definitely be more videos like this to come in the future, so please do comment and subscribe. Let us know what you guys want to see next, and we'll work on bringing those videos to you. So I'll catch you guys in the next video.